So, Dawntrail is finally here, and with it has come a plethora of new content to play through and enjoy in Final Fantasy XIV. Hello and welcome back, goats, to the Big Blue Purple channel. Today I wanted to share my initial thoughts on Dawntrail with you guys now that it's been out for about a week, or early access started about a week ago, and I've had time to complete the MSQ and all of the level 100 dungeons as well. For this video, I'll be keeping it as spoiler-free as possible, so I'm only vaguely going to share my opinion on the story, and I'll also only be showing footage from the level 91 dungeon that was shown at the media tour. In the future, I'll be going into full spoilers in a separate video, probably about a week after you see this one. So if you're interested in hearing my full spoilers thoughts, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Anyways, without further ado, let's talk about my first impressions with Dawntrail. In terms of the actual launch experience itself, it was much better than Endwalker in terms of the actual queue times and whatnot. I had no problem getting on the servers at server up, and the entire time I was playing through the story, I only had one disconnection error, and I think it affected pretty much all of Ether the day it happened. It wasn't just me, because when I tried to log back on, there was like a 7,000 player queue. So overall, it was a very smooth launch, especially compared to the previous expansion. My first order of business once I was actually able to get on the game was to go unlock Viper and level it to 90 so I could play the story on it. This was definitely a decision made against my better judgment, knowing full well that there were no tanks or healers added in this expansion, and that basically nobody is going to be playing them. If you've tried to level a DPS job on this game in the last week, you know exactly what I'm talking about. On day one, I actually waited over an hour for leveling roulette and it didn't pop, so I just gave up and I queued for 24-man and frontline, which were the only two roulettes that I could reliably get to pop in the first couple of days that felt like an actual decent use of my time. So once all of us DPS players collectively realized there's no way in hell we're going to get our queues to pop, I think half of us went to Bajja and half of us went to Endwalker zones because everyone was just doing fates in all of these places, and it was kind of comical how many Vipers and Pictomancers there were everywhere. This is honestly one of the most memorable parts about this expansion's launch for me now, just because of like the insane hordes of people in Bajja. I've never seen anything like it before. Like, dude, a fate would spawn on your map, and if you weren't fucking hauling ass to it right away, you'd miss it because of how fast people were clearing it out. So yeah, I really didn't see myself having such a great time in Bajja on day one, but that's what ended up happening. I think it only took me about 4 or 5 hours to get Viper from 80 to 90, which really wasn't that bad considering the fact that I couldn't even use things like leveling roulette. So yeah, Bajja definitely gets a thumbs up for me if you're wondering how to level one of the new jobs and you're struggling with the queue times. I'm sure others can vouch for Endwalker fates in the comments, especially if you want bi-colored gemstones to buy some stuff in the new zones. Now, to actually talk about the new content itself, I'm not going to go into any specifics here because, like I said, this is going to be spoiler-free, but the dungeons and trials in this expansion, man, completely night and day, like mechanically and creatively, than the previous expansions, in my opinion. There is just something completely new and fresh about these fights, and I don't quite know how to explain it, but I think you'll know what I mean, especially once you get into the level 83 dungeon and onwards. The first dungeon, and the one you'll be seeing footage of in this video, is, in my opinion, the weakest of the bunch in this expansion, and it doesn't quite have the same level of creativity as the ones following it. So please don't set your expectations there, it gets a lot cooler. The trials especially all feel like huge steps in the right direction mechanically. They feel fast-paced even on their normal modes, and there were tons of mechanics that had me actually racking my brain even on the normal mode going, how the hell am I supposed to resolve this? I really hope the design choices present in the current level 100 expert dungeons persists into the future and into these Dawntrail patch dungeons, because it's so much more fun when a dungeon actually demands you to pay attention to it and I can't just autopilot my way through every single roulette. With just how many dungeons there are in the game and how long it would take a given player to get to level 100 for the first time, I think is absolutely a justified step up in difficulty. I mean, if you've gone all the way through the game, all the way through Endwalker and post-Endwalker, then there's absolutely no reason that you wouldn't be able to handle these dungeons. I already saw a forum post the other day of a guy asking for one of the dungeons to be nerfed, and I was like, man, like the expansion just came out and we're already doing this. Like, we really can't have nice things in this game, can we? And speaking of which, I'm going to talk about Viper in a bit because, you know, I've been playing it this entire expansion, but I also saw in the process of recording this video that they've gone and they're saying that they're going to make Viper easier and they're going to remove positionals from it, which is like, why the hell are they doing this, man? Like, I just started playing this job and it's been out for a week and are already making it easier. We really are seeing the death of positionals in 4K, man. Only in the year 2024 will someone look you dead in the eyes and say 2 flank and 2 rear is way too many positionals and they need to remove them. This shit seriously saddens me, man, but it is what it is, and I hope Viper continues to be a fun job regardless. Positionals aside, though, just talking about Viper at large and how I'm feeling about it, I'm really enjoying the job. It's super flashy and fast-paced. It's got tons of off GCDs and these like super satisfying double weaves between certain attacks. And I absolutely love its Reawaken window. It's up there with Enshroud for me as one of the most satisfying combos in the game. In terms of actual job difficulty, while it is obviously subjective for the most part, I will say in general it seems to kind of be around Reaper in difficulty. It's very, very easy to pick up, and it seems to have quite a bit of room for optimization, if that's something you're interested in. It also just doesn't take up a lot of space on your hotbar because many of the buttons are consolidated into the same button. And I think Viper actually handles it very well without feeling like you're just some auto combo job pressing 1-1-1-1 to do everything. It does a good job at consolidating the buttons without, turning it into that. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this job. I'm planning to bring it into the extremes, see what I think of it in that content, and then I'll decide if I'm going to bring it into Savage or if I'm going to play Reaper in Savage. I have not decided yet. As for Pictomancer, I haven't had the opportunity to try it myself yet, but the people I do know who have tried it say it's absolutely incredible, and it seems to be taking the DPS charts by storms right now, if that's something you're interested in. So we will see how Pictomancer does this expansion, but it seems to be doing pretty damn well so far. To give some thoughts on the new zones added in the expansion without actually showing them to you, I think they're pretty damn good this time around. They aren't quite as mind-blowing as places like Elpis or Ultima Thule, but I think that was a given coming off of Endwalker. And there are still absolutely some fantastic areas in this expansion. The graphics update is also especially noticeable in these new zones. You can tell they were designed with it in mind when compared to some of the older content where, it does look nicer but not quite as nice as the new Dawntrail stuff. I actually had a lot of fun finding the ether currents and just exploring these new zones. I'm surprisingly excited to go in and do the shared fates and farm out those rewards, because I've never bothered with that stuff before, and I think it'll be a lot more fun on expansion release when there's still a ton of people actually doing these fates, and you're in, a big group instead of just you and 2 other guys. The new city-states they added are also absolutely fantastic. Solution 9 is unlike anything we've ever seen before, and Tuliolol is just really pretty, and it has a great soundtrack. As for the story itself, I think it's a mixed bag with some really cool moments, but a lot of tedium in between. But I would obviously encourage you to play the story for yourself and form your own opinions, because what I find boring and tedious, you may find interesting and fun. That being said, I do want to kind of hone in on some more objective criticisms I have of the story, being the severe lack of solo instances this time around when compared to the previous 2 expansions, it feels like. This is especially disappointing given how long Dawntrail is, but I don't want to get too much into it as to avoid spoilers. It's just there's not a lot of solo instances this time around. I specifically think of the In From the Cold solo instance, I believe it was called in Endwalker, where you play as a Garlean soldier and you have to do this huge trek back to the camp without, getting murdered by these Magitech drones because you're super weak and you can barely fight back. And I remember that solo instance creating a lot of immersion in Endwalker and just being one of the most memorable parts of that entire expansion for me. And I can safely say there's really no solo instance on that level here, and I think that's pretty disappointing. I know a lot of people complained about that solo instance because they're bitches, but personally, I loved it, and I think we need more stuff like that. Another criticism that's just coming more and more to the forefront with me with this story is the lack of voice-acted cutscenes, man. This is Square Enix we're talking about, billion-dollar company here. We know you can afford to pay your voice actors, so why is it that it feels like 40% of main story cutscenes are not voiced? It's absolutely unreal to me when the game has been around for this long and we've gotten this much story content and just how impactful the MSQ is for so many players. Hell, there's so many people who only play this game for the MSQ. So to me, there is no excuse for this full story not to be voice acted. It's ridiculous at this point. I was already starting to get pretty fed up with this in Endwalker, especially regarding the Pandemonium Raid series. I felt those blue quests absolutely deserved voice acting for how incredibly important they were to the story at the time, but alas, no, it's a blue quest, it's a raid series, it doesn't get voice acting. But I don't know, let me know what you guys think. Were you guys disappointed by the lack of voice acting in this expansion, or is it just not a big deal to you? My opinion on the story itself is that it was pretty slow in the first half and I wasn't terribly interested in it, and in the second half it picked up considerably and I actually enjoyed what was happening for the most part. It certainly doesn't hold a candle to Shadowbringers or Endwalker in my opinion, but it's also not even anywhere close to as bad as like a Realm Reborn, so, don't get it twisted. I'm just feeling kind of lukewarm on this one narratively. It had good moments, and I had fun with it, but it wasn't the most mind-blowing thing in the world. I'll go into much more detailed criticisms when I go into my full spoiler video. As for how I hope they can improve the MSQ in the future, I really hope they find ways to incorporate just more gameplay into our MSQ experience. I think solo instances were a great remedy for this, but in this expansion, there just aren't that many of them. Instead, they've chosen to double down on those god-awful stealth missions because apparently this is Metal Gear Solid. So yeah, I hope in the future they either expand the amount of dungeons and trials initially added into an expansion, so there's more gameplay in that regard, or they find ways to just incorporate more gameplay into the questing experience, whether it be having a quest just spawn a huge group of enemies for you to fight, or something of that nature to just let us press buttons instead of walking around and clicking on NPCs' heads. Overall, I would just say keep your expectations in check if you're a story person and you're really looking forward to the story this time around. This is nowhere near the level of Shadowbringers in my opinion. Finally, I just want to talk about some of the quality of life improvements they added in Endwalker that I think are great additions to the game. I think the double die channel is fantastic, it's present on many pieces of gear, and it looks pretty good on most of them. There is some pieces of gear where you're like, this isn't a second die channel, like this doesn't change the color of anything, they lied, right? But for the most part, it's pretty good. I also love the way the new faceware slot was implemented. If you get a pair of glasses now for that slot, you just go and click on it, and then you can pick the color from the menu. You don't actually have to have dye or anything on hand, which is super, super nice. They also went ahead and removed the Walk of Shame from dungeons, meaning that if you die to a dungeon boss, you'll no longer have to run all the way back there. The teleporter will actually teleport you to the boss, like it should have done. This is an extremely good change, and I think it's a borderline necessity given the dungeons we have now in Dawntrail and how much more difficult they are. The music in this expansion is absolutely fantastic as well this time around, with the 4th zone having one of my favorite OSTs along with the level 95 and 97 dungeons. Overall, I've been having an absolute blast with Dawntrail thus far, and I would absolutely recommend returning and giving it a shot, especially if you're interested in the battle content and raiding and whatnot, because I think that's going to be the strongest aspect of this expansion. It really seems to be shaping up that way. I'm really hopeful for the future of this expansion, and I'm really excited to see what kind of creativity they bring to the table with these fights. Otherwise, I'd love to hear from you guys. What's been your favorite parts of this expansion so far? What did you think of the story? What have you thought of the combat content so far? I would love to know. I also haven't had the chance to do any crafting or gathering this expansion, so hey, if you're someone who's been doing that, let me know what you think of the new content for that side of the game. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Please stay tuned for more Big Blue Purple uploads in the future. I apologize for my long-ass hiatus from this game. The reality is I just burned myself the hell out in 6.5 and could not stomach playing the game any longer. But now I went and played a bunch of other games for like 6-7 months, and I am very happy to be back, and Dawntrail has very much reinvigorated my interest in Final Fantasy XIV. Thank you all for watching. Remember to drop a like on the video, but only if you did, and subscribe to the Big Blue Purple channel if you're not already. Now go enjoy yourself some Dawntrail, and I'll catch you in the next one.